was developed in 1940 by a team of engineers at Galvin Manufacturing, which is the precursor to Motorola. A bunch of these went in on D-Day at Omaha Beach. Crystal controlled, 360 milliwatts. So this is like QRPP
PP
stuff.
Yeah.
So Roger would appreciate most of these radios because it's way down there in terms of power. But this was, this is what we all watched on TV when we watched Combat. Combat, the show.
Absolutely.
I'm sure everybody, watched Combat. Vic Morrow.
Dick, what was the frequency range of that?
Got to refer to my notes here since 3.5 to 6 megahertz.
Really? And with that antenna?
All AM.
So that antenna at 80 to 60, 50 meters
Yeah.
with that length of antenna and 360 milliwatts is really just for...
Their range,
Short.
their spec range was like a mile and a half. Not far at all. Ground wave, kind of stuff. So,
And my first cell phone looked just like that.
just about.
My old
Just
brick.
about. Okay, now,
And what's the difference between those and the newer ones?
so these are the newer ones. The difference is these are newer. Let me look at my notes here.
Different case.
Yeah, these are the PRC 6s, which were referred to as prick 6s. Or they were also referred to as the banana radio because of the curvy design. They started developing a new walkie-talkie after the Second World War to replace the 536. And, these came into service during the Korean War and were used all the way through Vietnam. Raytheon developed these radios. And they were, these are the 6-meter radios, 47 to 55 megahertz. So this radio also signaled the transition in terms of radio communication from HF to VHF stuff. So again, QRPP is a quarter of a watt, and I think I can't get this cap off, but this is the antenna, which this is the short antenna, which if you can see. Now, I need one more hand. They've got it wrapped. I don't know if you can see this. It's kind of like a Venetian blind deal, and the antenna wraps right around
It's
the
tape
body.
measure.
Huh?
It's a tape measure.
It's like a tape measure thing. And actually, one of my biggest clients when I had my consulting business was Hunter Douglas. And actually, that company developed this technology, that Venetian blind sprung metal stuff. The precursor to Hunter Douglas developed that technology back in the war days.
How many tubes are in there?
I should know that. It should be in my notes.
How many watts?
It's got, let me see, 13.
Wow.
Yeah, all these
Jeez.
babies have tubes in them. Yeah,
13 in there?
yeah, 13. Sub-miniature, small tubes, that kind of
Wonder
stuff.
how hot it got. Well, I couldn't get too hot.
Yeah, I don't know. But its range was, a mile and a half, 250 milliwatts. I'm not sure how many, I don't know if I have an indication as how many were made, but. And these, were used by a lot of hams, were converted by a lot of hams to use on 6 meters. But one thing about this one was this thing requires 4 different voltage specs for different circuits. 1.5 volts, 4.5, 45, and 90 volts. And so while some hams, could convert them and use them, they're kind of a pain in the ass because of all the different voltage requirements.
Dick, what was the modulation?
These are FM.
FM?
Yeah, pretty sure.
Oh,
Yeah, FM.
AM.
No, these are FM. These are FM.
The other ones?
These guys.
How far away would the enemy be from these? I mean, would they be able to pick up any of these
Oh, yeah.
signals? And
Absolutely.
Sure.
Isn't that where the code talkers came in? And
Yeah.
You're beyond my
They
realm
were,
of expertise.
Germans were using 10 meters.
Yeah, these
in
are-
World War II. They didn't realize how
These are
far it would go.
How far it would go?
And there were people in the United States picking up German
Yeah.
field transmissions.
From tanks.
Yeah.
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 So these guys are AM.
Oh, I'm sorry, they were AM?
The 536s, World War II. Those are AM rigs. These are FM.
And there you have your AM FM radio.
That's right.
Get a pair of those in the car.
Okay, so this is the backpack radio, which I don't know on the fact sheets I've got. I'll pass around. Let me pass around. I've got a couple sets of fact sheets. These are the classic. You got there's the radio guy and another guy talking on the phone. It's like a walking phone booth.
How much that thing weigh?
This thing? The
Yeah.
big one?
Mm-hmm.
I have it here in my specs. Stand by. $32.
Oh, that was
I
close.
guess,
Yeah.
I guess 20 pounds.
38. One version A is 38 pounds.
Oh.
Version B is 32. So these were developed and went into development in 1940. Again, Motorola was involved in that. These covered 40 to 48 megahertz. Well, this was the one that marked the transition from HF to VHF. And then we had these guys. Again, you qualify for Rogers Award. 0.3 watts. And they were in action everywhere. European theater, Pacific. And then, of course, they were the precursor to a similar radio that was used in Vietnam and Korea. So I got a note here. Motorola alone made 50,000 of these things.
Jeez.
So this is, I don't know, this is considered the first walkie-talkie. So, I guess you can walk and talk on it.
Right. The other one's a handy
Do you
talk.
have in your notes the cost of it, cost of manufacturing?
No.
The cost of government?
No.
It's only 32 pounds.
Huh?
It's only 32 pounds.
Hey,
With the batteries?
I remember when I got my first portable computer, K-Pro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
All right.
Sewing machine.
So any questions I can't answer on receivers and this stuff? This is just an example of a typical not a radio telephone handset, field telephone. So let's get to this guy. This is called the Radio Set SCR 284, and the radio, I guess, is designated as BC 654. But this rig is not QRP. It's an AM transmitter and receiver and a CW transmitter and receiver. Operated on 3.8 to 5.8 megahertz. And the output on these things was 17 watts for AM and 24 watts for CW. Now these were used everywhere. They first went into service in North Africa, and then they were used in Europe, and they were used in the Pacific. I think my notes here indicates that over 150,000 of these systems were made during the war, and after the war they sold for about $15. One of the primary functions for this radio was to coordinate. This started out in North Africa, was to coordinate naval gun bombardments. So the teams that went out to spot where they needed to drop the ordnance would radio back coordinates and whatnot using these rigs. And the reason, Claude spent about 4 or 5 years collecting all these different components because his father was in an artillery division, and what his dad did was he went out and spotted, for the guns. So he was in the team that went out ahead to figure out where to drop the bombs, and then
Did he ever put power to any of this stuff and try to operate it?
he's tried on one of the handy talkies. I don't think he's done anything with this stuff. Here's an interesting note. I mentioned 150,000 total were made, but 50,000 were made in support of D-Day. So
50,000?
50,000, yeah.
How many
And
men went on D-Day? Like 150,000?
many. During Korea, these things were used, and they had gas generators at that point to power them. And what I've got here is kind of the basics of the system, and